Welcome, RegenAG Nation. This is RANPOD 6. I'm your host, Roger McKinley, and I have two guests with us today in-house, our agronomist, Parson Gordon, and our new guest speaker, Tim Cornie with Thousand Springs Mill.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm super excited to be here with you today and really excited to have Tim.
Well, thank you very much. It's very nice you guys to invite me to come.
Let's give everybody kind of a view of what Thousand Springs Mill is and where have you guys been, what's the products and what you bring to the market here in this space.
Well, I can start off at the very beginning. I met this guy that was from Germany, and he was stranded, and I had my daughter in a horse clinic, and anyway, he needed a place to stay and needed a pickup. So I threw him the keys to a pickup, and I had an extra house on the farm, and I said, go see what you want to see and go do what you want to do. He was born on the communist side of Germany, and when the wall came down, when he got out, he traveled the world and was in India, saw people healed with all kinds of different cancers and stuff with different herbs and roots. And then he went to Brazil. He was in Jamaica. He's all over the world. And he got into the food industry and high-end chefs and stuff like that. And anyway, so he was so thankful for what I did. He said, you come over to Europe and you see what you want to see. And I said, well, I want to go to Ukraine. And that was in 2014. So I was in a plane flying over there, and Putin invaded Ukraine on my way over. So I ended up sleeping in the back of a diesel van and camped all through France and Europe, Switzerland, Spain, Germany. The culture and the people and the health, they eat a lot of bread. And they don't have the celiac problems that we have here. They eat a little bit older grains, then they flour it. And I talked to a chemist guy later that I became friends with, and he went into the science because I couldn't understand why we went from no celiacs to all these gut issues. Like, how did that happen? And he goes, we have bred this grain to 42 to 44 chromosomes, and the old varieties have only 14 to 18 chromosomes. And he goes, our digestive system has not been able to keep up with the way we've, planted, put all kinds of plant disease, resistance in some of these varieties, higher yield, shorten the straw. We've just kind of modified some things, not genetically modified, but they're not GMO with the gene with glyphosate in it. But, they hybrided a certain way that it just, we're just not used to it. Our digestive systems are more designed for the older style of grains. But to be profitable, we had to have the yield, and we had to have the resistance, and we had to have, all these, and it just kind of worked out that way.
There's just so much stuff here to unpack, and it's absolutely phenomenal to hear the experiences, Tim, that you have in traveling the world and seeing these farms, which I'm just going to make a pretty broad assumption that a lot of these farmers haven't had the opportunity of what you're talking about seeing. I think what would be really impactful for farmers out there is understanding, the scope. How big is your farm? What have you guys been doing specifically on your farm? And I know there's two parts of the farm. There's the farm side, actual growing of the product, and the retail side. So why don't you give everybody kind of insight to, size of the farm, what you grow on the farm, what your practices are, and then kind of give insight to the retail aspect of what you guys are doing as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. So the farm actually is gravity pressured pivots. So there's about 150 foot of fall. So every 2 foot of drop is 1 pound of pressure for water. And so I was lucky enough to have a hillside, and we put in some big ponds, and then we gravity through these pivots. And so that's saved me a lot of cost, being efficient. Back in the day before I started any of this, I had a feedlot there and was buying cattle and whatever. And then I would go out there and harvest my grain, and I'd go out there and harvest it. And as soon as I had an opportunity, I broadcasted barley and then get it waist high or, knee high. And then I was buying, light feeders and putting them out there and then getting that compensatory gain. And then those got too expensive and I couldn't make any money. So then I started buying, I had some stock cows, but I started buying cull cows, and I was flipping cull cows. So I could buy them after the desert, starved down and hungry. And I was buying them for 45 cents a pound. And then by February, they weighed 400 pounds more, and they were worth 70 cents because the glut came through in September, and no one wanted to feed them hay and all that. So you buy them, you put them out there, get them, fat. And then you had about about 40% had a calf in them, and so then, you could sell them as a pair, or you sold them with a 7 or 8 on their hip, and then, I was doing that. So that was kind of the cattle side of it. I got out of that, and then now the farming side with the gravity pressure, I'm planting beans and popcorn and Tibetan purple barley and ancient grains, and then the buckwheat came into fruition. And so that's a crop that we plant behind our winter wheat or the barleys. You harvest it, plant it. It's great for the bees. It's a phosphate pump for the soil. And then we bring in 4,000 head of sheep and start mob grazing that. And I got about 800 acres that I farm under gravity pressure pivots.
And what about the retail side? So that's the farming aspect of what you guys have done for the growing side. Now we have this retail side, which is a whole new market that you guys have opened up because of the crop that you're growing. So tell us a little bit about the products you're selling, how you guys are packaging them, how you're different than, the standard bag of beans or the standard bag of popcorn we'd go get in a retail store.
Yeah. So, what's nice about diversity, because you've got this rotation between all these other crops, so you're rotating in. So we got 4 types of beans. We got the Pinos, the Great Northerns, the Reds, and then we have the popcorn, and then we grow a Hopi blue corn that goes back thousands of years, tribal corn for the Hopi blue, ancient tribal corn. Beautiful flavor, beautiful color. And so everything comes in from the field. It's 8 miles away, and then it gets staged, and then it gets run through the cleaners. And we have these high-end cleaners. We work with some big clients, and their specs are so high that if you have 1 ounce of dust or anything on there, it's rejected. If it don't hit that moisture properly, it won't pass either. So for some of these bigger companies we work with, we bring them beans in, we clean it, and then we also have a dryer room where we got these box rice dryers that can do 8 semis at a time loads. It's kind of a big room. So we have that quality when we
That's
bring in.
That's a pretty big room.
That's a big room. So we can bring in popcorn. So like it's at 18% moisture. Ideal pop for popcorn is 14%. So we can put them in these box dryers, turn on these rice down to like 70 to 80 degrees, slowly bring down that moisture. And then we also have issues where we have organic farmers in certain regions as you come more west. Glenn's Ferry seems to be a problem. It's so hot there that they are always trying to crash those beans as early as they can to get that moisture to meet those specs, because they don't want to can them if it's under 10. But one thing that's beautiful about that room is in the fall when the humidity gets high, we can just shut off the heaters and just turn the fans on and bring that outside humidity to slowly bring that moisture back up to meet that spec. And so we're able to save crop. We've had other companies call us like, man, we're going to ruin it. We're going to lose all these beans because it rained. We can't get them out. They're 35% moisture. Bring them over. We'll dry them. So then we throw them on them dryers. And to save the quality, you got to slide. You can't just dry real fast. It's not like that. You have to go real slow, let them, and it takes some time and a little energy and power. But, we're able to save a lot of crops with that room.
Ah, that's really cool.
Yeah. But popcorn it's a recession proof because anybody can afford a bag of popcorn, and you can feed your whole family a snack, and it's easy to make and whatever. I prefer that reason we haven't gone to the popcorn bag, the microwave bag, is because that plastic lining that's in that bag is not healthy, because when you throw it in the microwave and let that melt onto that kernel, there's some microplastics in there and stuff like that. And so people ask us because they want that ready to eat that way, and I'm like, well, we're not about that. So,
and
you
gotta go the old-fashioned way.
Well, it's just easy to throw a little bit of olive oil or coconut oil or a little bit of butter or whatever into a pan and just throw your 2 kernels in there, and then as soon as they pop, and you add your 1/4 cup of popcorn, and it just does its thing, and it tastes better when it's warm and freshly seasoned with like the Himalayan and the sea salt and the pepper and however you want to do it.
Yep.
And
So that sounds like that's coming back to your morals. You really found that food was grown in a different way in different countries, and you're trying to replicate that, and you're keeping that in your business model as well. I want to kind of touch a little bit on the aspect of the farming that you guys have done. A lot of farmers out there right now are still pretty conventional minded, and we have a big shift in the farming world right now where people are looking at new ways of growing this. So one thing that we talked about before coming in here is, what did your chemical shed look like, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago versus today? If we walk on your farm, what does it look like now?
Well, you're going to see a lot more worms. You're going to see more worms. You're going to see, I've got lots of ducks and pheasants and, because we're also feeding them a few weed seeds too, so they love us a little bit. But the thing is, though, it is a different mindset. Now, I also got to say this. This is what motivated me. I used to be a chemical farmer. I used all that stuff back in the day. I also took a bath in it. The hose would break off the eptamsenolin when you're putting it on your bean ground and just hose you. And then you patched it, put it on, finished the field, and then took a shower, and you could taste that eptamsenolin on your tongue. Remember?
In the meantime, it's soaked into your skin.
It's soaked into your skin or whatever.
I can only imagine the EIQ scores that we're talking about.
Yeah.
He's swallowing that stuff. That's why they generated that in the first place.
Well, and so, we used to, you had your backpack sprayer, and you sloshed a little bit of Roundup, and 2,4-D would come down the back of your neck because
Yep, I remember that.
We've all done it.
Yep.
Well, and I have a son that has tuberous sclerosis, which is benign tubers in the brain and one behind the heart, one behind the eye. It's very, very rare. How did that happen? I've done genetic testing on me and everybody. It's not in our genetic makeup at all, but it showed up. So the question is, what did I do? What did I do to my body that changed my genetic makeup to when I had Wyatt, that he has this problem?
That's interesting. So we're talking about reducing chemicals as you've transitioned. As I talk with a lot of growers about going that direction, what would you say was it difficult to start eliminating the chemicals off your farm? What were some of the mistakes you made? How long does that process realistically take to where you're not relying on glyphosate or hard chemistry fungicides or whatever it is that you're trying to use out there?
Excellent question. So the best way to do it takes 3 years to get to the certification to where you can be certified organic through the state. And a lot of times the best way to do it is put in a crop alfalfa and just swath it and harvest it and, put your manure on or however, compost, whatever you want to do as a fertilizer. And then cut it for 3 years or 2 years, whatever you want to do. And then that's a good start. Then you come in with a crop of corn or beans and whatever. The secret organic farming is a good tine weeder. They're 40 foot. They got these little vibrating fingers. And when you go in there and you plant that crop, you hit that before it comes out of the ground, and you take out all your little weeds, and a good cultivator. Get that good cultivator out there and just be diligent, and a harrow. Sometimes when those beans are up just a little bit, you take the old days, you just take a harrow and don't look back, right? Well, it does make a difference. And then you put a good heel on there. You're going to spend a lot more time on a small horsepower cultivator. That is a secret weapon right there. You get your 100 horse, 120 horse tractor out there, put a good cultivator on it, set it up, be diligent, a tine weeder. They're 40 foot. You can cover a lot of ground fast. And then you got a good harrow. And so basically you're farming the same way your great grandfather did. You're farming like they did.
Before there was all those chemicals.
Before there was all the chemicals. You're farming like them, but we have the tractors, the tools, we got the electric weeders. And then we can go down another rabbit hole, and we're going to talk about quantum computers. The technology that's coming down the road. I go to these robotic trade shows because of the package equipment, stuff like that. I see these robotic arms that move so fast that they'll have 100 ping pong balls sitting on a platform, and go from 1 to 100. You go over to that computer and hit 50, 25, 35, whatever you want to do on 5 of them, and it'll move those ping pong balls in the blink of an eye.
Wow.
So what you're going to see is the technology come into where you're going to have a Tesla Cybertruck, let's say. They're $75,000, and they run on a battery. And they're going to run off GPS, and they're going to be like a Roomba in your living room. And they're going to go through that field, and they're going to have an apron on the back of that. It's kind of like a camper shell unit that's going to slide in the back. Basically what it is like a color sorter. We got these color sorters that, we do 12,000 pounds an hour, just rifling through these cameras, and it takes any defect out there. If you got this or that or whatever, it takes a puff of air and that camera sees it. Well, that kind of technology, you're going to see a camera that's going to come over these robotic arms. It's going to have a 22-inch reach or 30. You're going to have 6 of them going 30 foot wide, and that Cybertruck is going to roll through the field. It's going to go for a couple of days on a battery charge because they're going 300 miles or 250 miles on a run, but they're going to be in that field creeping along there at 1.5 miles an hour, and it's going to be able to identify. And then what's going to also happen is you're going to have crop diversity with this system. Number one, that camera is going to be able to identify if you got a plant disease. It's going to be able to identify if you've got insect infestation, and it's going to be able to say, okay, the nightshade goes, the lamb quarter goes, the red root goes, but the pea or the clover stays because it's fixing nitrogen to the corn, and then it's also a flower for the bees. And then also, when you have microscopic wasps, ladybugs, and whatever, it's going to be able to flag like, hey, you got a start of a problem here. And then you're going to go, okay, so you go release a bucket of ladybugs or lacewings or your wasp to annihilate that area to where the hot spot is, let's say. It's just going to give you so much data.
Yep.
So that's what I'm hearing you saying right now, which is one of the things we've touched on is the technology aspect of it. But you also have that management piece, which, good managers create good farms and good products at the end of the day. So it's that management process of how farmers are currently looking for an easy, quick solution of, hey, I want this simple. I'm going to spray my Roundup. I'm going to put down my NPK. That's what my farm manager said to me versus you're talking a little more integrated system in your cover cropping. You have a plan for what your crop rotation looks like, and then the integration of this technology, which is that next wave or that next generation is coming in and saying, we can start utilizing new technologies on the farm that are going to make us more efficient or more accurate when we are trying to come in and deal with a problem at hand.
Well, yeah, and so and like I say, they've got some of these laser weeders now, but they're $1.4 million and they don't cover enough ground and you can't pencil them out. That's why I love this idea of marrying three technologies that already exist to get it down to a $250,000 piece of equipment, but you're not buying any chemicals. You're not, and then you're no-tilling. So the bottom line is when you leave that carbon in the soil and you leave that you're starting to build those aggregates in that soil. So when you go in the Midwest to the Okolala Aquifer, there's so many straws in that thing that they're starting to finally regulate the water flow because you go down to Lubbock. I was down in Lubbock and I was down in Amarillo. The cities are even struggling for water because the Okolala Aquifer is slipping, see? But when you can get the aggregates in the soil and say you can leave your carbon, your residue, and everything on top, and you're just no-tilling, and you're getting your worms, and then you're getting all your phosphate, your potash, all your micros are coming back from the straw when it breaks down, then you're building that aggregate in the soil. Now you only need maybe 2 less irrigations a year. When you take that massive amount of acres with 2 less irrigations a year, or when it does rain, it holds it an extra 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's a tremendous amount of water.
Then all of a sudden they can have less straws pulling that aquifer down. And so this technology is going to be really awesome. What's going to be great about it is you can go out there no-till and then have this cultivator that's going to go out there and do the weeds and rotate back and forth, and you're going to be able to have that crop diversity. And it's going to take years to figure it out. I mean, this isn't going to happen overnight. That's where I see it kind of going.
So that's really the future direction you see of what farming's going to look like. Now, I'm going to jump back to you guys have created a brand new market that people in the industry are saying, sure, I would love to go grow seed potatoes for a regenerative agriculture-based company, or I'm going to grow regenerative beans. There's no market for it. How did you guys foray into a market and say, hey, we're going to bring a product to the market, compete with everything else that's out there mass-produced, and stay in business? I think that's what a lot of the farmers are saying. Yeah, well, they have a market. They've already developed that market. How are we going to go compete in there? How did you guys figure out where that sweet spot was for Thousand Springs Mill?
Well, that is a legitimate concern that those farmers have because I've gone to these soil workshops and stuff like that, and you have all these investors, these private equity people. They want to buy farmland. They want to buy farmland. It's a concern of mine because I'm worried about the hedge funds owning all the farmland down the road, and the small farmer just getting shoved out. It's a concern I have. The regenerative thing is they want to be part of that regenerative, and these guys say we're going to support and we're going to give all this money for regenerative farms. And I told them, I said, well, until you build a pipeline market for it, what good is it? You're going to grow all this regenerative, which needs to happen, but where are you going to sell it and who's going to buy it?
Yeah.
And so I told them, I said, you got to invest money first on building the market, and education. Because here's the thing about organic. When you have that seal, we don't need anything genetically modified. You have, you're audited and which is good, keeps all the bad people out. And you got some people that cheat, but they always get discovered or they all fail. You're always going to have a cheater in there long term. It's short term gain, long term loss. And so the thing is, though, when you have a regenerative, it's such a loose term, and the consumer is confused. You can have one guy throw one goat in the middle of a field and say, look at me, I'm regenerative. Well, yeah, you got a goat out there, but is that truly regenerative? You know what I mean? I mean, the bottom line is it's too loose. And organics, you have to follow a protocol to be there. Until that market gets the education to the consumer, and they're overloaded with too much already, it's really tough. It's just like the non-GMO butterfly on that seal in our package. We have the organic, and everybody knows that organic, not everybody knows this, organic means non-GMO, no chemicals, whatever. But then people are confused between non-GMO and organic, and they'll say, well, non-GMO is better because it doesn't have anything genetically modified. Well, organic doesn't either. We put both on there because you got a quarter of a second when that buyer picks that up. If they feel comfortable, they put it in the bag.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to have them think, right? Regenerative is for people that are got time in their hands, listen to podcasts like this one, get educated to know what is regenerative, what is organic, what's genetically modified. There's a lot in there that confuses the consumer.
Parson brought up one of the things that you guys are working on, and he said it's called a healthy bowl. That is a combination of multiple products you guys are currently doing right now. Can you give our viewers a little insight to what that looks like coming out into the market?
Well, yeah. So here's the thing. We're oatmeal and rice and beans and raw staple pantry ingredients, right? Which if you could take your crock pot and you got a family of 4, you can feed them all for about 30 cents a serving. It's really inexpensive when you cook that way, right? Super healthy, feeds the soul. The problem is the households are shrinking. So when you go over to Japan, you go over to Korea. I was talking to a Korean gal in the store there, and she goes, here, let me show you what I buy. They wanted a recyclable plastic bowl that was ready to eat because they didn't want to do dishes. They didn't want to dirty a bowl and clean it. So you have a retort bag where you can put it in a retort, open it, heat it up in the microwave or in a air fryer or in your boiling water or whatever, put it in a bowl, and then eat it, and then you throw the retort bag away, but you got to clean your bowl. Well, those girls didn't want to do dishes. They wanted to throw it in the recyclable bin. Then you come over here, because of inflation and the cost of having children and stuff like that, you got a lot of young people that don't want to have kids. They're struggling to pay their rent, car payment.
Inflation is on everything. It's not one specific. It's not like it's just fuel or food. It is everything across the board we're seeing inflation on.
That's correct. And so it's so we're seeing a global, not only is Korea seeing a population decrease, in Japan, they got upside down pyramid as well. We're starting to see that here in the United States. There's a lot of young kids that don't, like, how am I going to afford this? And the relationships and social media are changing so fast that they don't have anything, the values have changed a little bit of relationships the way they used to be.
And that's influencing our food now, like what you're getting at, okay?
Yeah, and so all of a sudden, so you got this household shrinking. So the bottom line is, and then you have elderly couples, either one dies or they're both alive, but they don't want to cook big meals. We're working on, I got a nutritionist and a really amazing chef, Kurt Martin. He is putting some beautiful ingredients together. And so we have a complete high nutritious, it's really super delicious food, other ingredients that's in this bowl. So you got this combo mix. And so when you eat it, you have a variety, but the nutrient profile is so good. And what's nice about when mom's at work and the kids come off of school, they can heat that up and have something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to be at a price point to where, because like if you take your family to McDonald's and there's 4 of you, you're going to spend $50.
Yep.
Right. But they're going to be able to eat for $20, $5 a packet.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And get 12 ounces. And so that's what we're trying to get dialed in.
So I guess that also opens up, the markets that you guys are currently in. And that comes back to part of this, that farmers are just getting smarter in all this. You're having to look at the bottom line. You're having to look at where the customers are, your supply chain. Every time you guys turn around, you're getting dinged with a point left and right on something. So two main markets from a distribution that you guys are going after, at the big box stores, at the Costco's and the Amazons of the world versus you guys are doing a lot of direct stuff on your own website. Tell our farmers out there, the difference in how you guys have developed both of those markets and what they should be focusing on if they're going to go down this route.
Well, okay, here's the thing. Being a little bit naive, this is way more expensive and way more difficult than I planned on. If you don't have the endurance and the grind to deal with brokers, to deal with this is probably the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. Here we're doing the right thing, growing healthy food, doing it all right. And then you got the brokers taking their piece, and the Unify KHE, they're trying to take their piece. And then you got they try to charge you so much per SKU, per store, per item. And you have to get a lot of turns to compensate for that fees. And so the transportation, I mean, there's a lot to this. Would say to anybody that's trying to do what we're doing, you think if you have a pretty package and you got a great story that it's going to be an instant sale, there's a lot of competition. I've worked really hard. And that's why we've been so diversified. I kind of want to go down the buckwheat market just a little bit with this, and then the retail. Yeah, we're working with Costco on a couple deals, but by the time they skin you up, there's a low margin there too. We were, I don't even know if I should say this, but we're cheaper than Orville Redenbacher in the store. Organic, sexier package, and cheaper. And they're still like, can't you lower your price a little bit more?
Wow.
And we're still cheaper than them on the shelf.
It's crazy.
And
That's absolutely crazy, especially with what we see in the market with inflation.
Yeah, and you're like going, hell, our margins are just right there, barely.
Well, and I don't know if a lot of people understand this, but this is, when you move into this market, it's not always lower yields. It's not sometimes you're coming in at lower input costs, but as people transition their farms to, regenerative or organic or whatever it is that they're doing, it takes a tremendous amount of time, and it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of initial cost to head that direction. So you're talking about putting a product on the shelf that's substantially better than the one next to it, and you're charging less for it, but you have a way higher input cost than the guy that has a more expensive product on the shelf. And this is simply because of demand, and it's like having a Yeti cooler versus a Coleman cooler kind of a deal.
And your food density nutrition, this is one thing that we have brought up that we're going to keep on bringing up in this podcast as we are looking at this and analyzing seeds. There's new technology out there that companies can now look at seed density nutrition. The product that you guys are bringing to the market is far superior from the standpoint that you don't have these kinds of chemicals, these forever chemicals that are out there, your glyphosates, your EPTAMs, and the quality of the food you're growing for actually our nutrition. And I think that's kind of where this all stems from is you've gone through this, you've seen it in your family, you've seen it in personal relationships, and now from a business standpoint, you've brought this to market, and it is a absolute challenge, even though this food is probably substantially healthier for us than, what we've been eating for the last 20 or 30 years.
Well, when you're in the food system, there's a mafia that you're butting up against in the food. I call them the food mafia. When you are working with these big giants, you're trying to get them off the shelf to put yours on the shelf, and they've already got the turns in the history. So you got to prove yourself. Well, we're going to lose cash flow if we go with you, so we're going to put you over here, and if you don't get the turns, you're out, right? One of the problems that I see, I mean, even though we have a superior product and we got the 1 pound bag and the 4 packs and variety packs and we got all this stuff and we got nice packaging and all that, it still is coming down to people want that food delicious and pretty much you're hand feeding it to their mouth. They don't want to do any extra work. And until we go to that next step, you're not going to see the turns and the volumes until we go to that ready to eat next step.
So I'm interested because, I mean, you and I both believe that this is the way forward for the food industry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from every aspect, from beef to, poultry to your grain, whatever it is. And we all know that as farmers start to do these practices, because this is a real thing that's happening where farmers are realizing that the standard conventional system, not only is the food not quite as healthy for you as an end product, the system is slowly failing as far as actual farming practices.
Yeah, I agree.
And so we know that, even when I go to a trade show, I have people come to the booth and say, hey, we've never really been interested in this, and we've always farmed conventionally, but we're seeing things failing. And so we realize that we have to educate ourselves in order to transition into something different. And it's simply they're looking that way from a profitability standpoint. So I think what you're doing is really cool because you're also developing value around these crops that are grown in a more sustainable method. Will there be a ton of demand for it in the future? Is it going to take 5 or 10 years? What is the projection for sustainably grown food? And is it going to overtake these conventional markets in such a way that in the future, growers are going to actually be more profitable as they grow, stuff regeneratively or organic?
Yeah, so I think that the consumer, I will say this, a lot of people listen to Joe Rogan, they listen to podcasts, they are trying to get as educated as they possibly can be. There's also a mistrust with some of the big corporations. Here's the bottom line is there are some major big corporate food manufacturers that don't have the trust of the consumer anymore. So people, once we get discovered more, as our SEOs go up and people find our story and find out why we do what we do, and people will put their money where their values are. And people are health conscious. Even though that inflation is an issue, they will put their money for food. So I think that market share, especially with the millennials, I bump into kids that are in their 30s and they're conscious too. They're running, they're exercising, and they're eating a lot of protein, and they're very looking at their food. And so I think that market's going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a good outlook for it. That kind of gives me a sense. I just, as I see this happening, one of the things that as we talk to growers about this, like I said, they feel like they have to change regardless of if they get paid more for it or not, because it's more about the practice and actually being successful on their farm than what the end product is. But as that value adds up for the end product, we're going to start hopefully seeing those farmers get paid a lot more. At least that's what I want to see, because I'm working with a lot of growers right now, and farming is very, very difficult right now, especially with the tremendous inflation, and at the same time, the actual value of the crop is going down from year to year. So I'm just super excited to see this market sort of get developed, and hopefully, the profitability of the grower will actually come back here, in the future.
And that was one thing about in our area there. I was talking to a friend that was a banker, and I said, we've got all our eggs in the Magic Valley and the dairy market. We're so dependent on the dairies and feed and whatever. And we got sugar factory, which is another diversified market. But the thing was, though, I said, we got to be more diversified. We got to be more than just dairy, cows, and sugar. We got to be thinking about other businesses that can advance with another market, and like the organic market or the regenerative ag sector that's coming on. I do believe this. I think once this technology gets so dialed in, and when you got a Roomba out in that field, and your cost of production is going to go down because you got a no-till drill, and you got that Roomba out there maintaining the weeds, and you're not tilling the soil, so you don't need a 500 horsepower tractor out there tearing up stuff. And you got your combine, and then we get this technology to where I think it's going. Then the early adapters are going to cut their costs to where they can be more efficient. And it's always been, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. Mm-hmm. You've got guys out there trying to get 400 bushel corn, but they spend $2,000 trying to do it. You got a guy that's popping 250 bushel corn, and he's got $150 invested. Who really wins? It's the low cost, high production producer that knows how to have that rotation and that balance is the winner.
Excellent. We've actually loved everything that we've put out there. We hope all of our guests have listened to this and are enjoying what Tim has brought to the table. Check them out at thousandspringsmill.com and check back in with us for our next podcast. Thank you.